The bow was the first thing I saw. Bright, shiny red, perched on top of a brand new BMW parked in my driveway like a trophy. The kind of car you only see in commercials, where perfect families celebrate Christmas with champagne and luxury keys. From the kitchen window, I watched my son Marcus beam with pride as he handed the keys to his mother-in-law, Linda. His voice carried across the cold December air. "Merry Christmas, Mom Linda." She clapped her hands to her face, squealing like a teenager, while my daughter-in-law, Ashley, jumped up and down, clapping as though they'd just cured cancer instead of buying a $60,000 car. My son's laughter was warm, his smile wide, the kind of smile a man wears when he's sure he's done something noble. I recognized that smile. I had seen it after his graduation, his wedding, even the day we handed him the down payment for his first house. That smile used to belong to me. But this time, it wasn't for me. It was for Linda. Inside the kitchen, my hands tightened around the little plastic piggy bank I'd unwrapped an hour earlier. Pink and childish, with 3 lonely bills rattling inside. $3. That was my Christmas gift from my only son. He'd smiled when he gave it to me, explaining in that rehearsed tone, "It's symbolic, Mom. You're always saving money. We thought this was perfect for you." Perfect. That's what I'd called it, too, because mothers are supposed to smile and nod, even when their hearts split open. I had thanked him sweetly, because what else was I supposed to do? But the truth was staring at me from the window. The truth was $60,000 wrapped in a red bow, shining for the world to admire. The truth was that after 35 years of raising him, scraping by, making sacrifices so he could have everything, I was worth $3. And Linda, polished, charming, and in this family for only 8 months, was worth a brand new BMW. I felt the December wind rattle the glass as I stood there, invisible in my own home. They were outside taking photos, laughing, and planning a victory lap around the neighborhood. And I was inside with a toy pig and a heart full of questions. That was the moment something inside me shifted. A woman can only be overlooked for so long before she remembers she has teeth. I placed the piggy bank on the counter next to the stack of unsent Christmas cards, my smile long gone. Because this wasn't just about a car. It was the beginning of a game Linda never expected me to win. I wish I could say the piggy bank didn't bother me. That I laughed it off, tossed it onto a shelf, and told myself not to be so sensitive. But as I stood in my kitchen that Christmas night, I couldn't help but think back to every sacrifice that had built Marcus into the man he is today. I remembered the years when Tom and I clipped coupons to make sure Marcus had new sneakers for school. I remembered sitting up at the kitchen table until midnight, balancing bills on a calculator that never seemed to land on the right number because tuition was due and the mortgage didn't care. I remembered pawning my grandmother's bracelet to cover the last semester of his college tuition. He graduated debt-free, not because he was lucky, but because his parents bled themselves dry to give him that chance. And the down payment on his house? That didn't fall from the sky. Tom worked double shifts, I picked up nursing overtime, and together we scraped together $30,000 to hand him the keys to his first home. I can still see the look on his face that day, shocked, grateful, teary-eyed. That was the son I raised. But gratitude fades, doesn't it? It fades when a new woman walks into the picture with silver hair perfectly styled, clothes that smell like expensive boutiques, and a voice that drips honey every time she says, "Marcus, darling." Linda, or as Ashley insists on calling her, Mom Linda. I used to be just Mom, plain ordinary background Mom. But Linda swept in like a queen claiming her throne, and suddenly she was the fun one, the glamorous one, the woman who understood Marcus and Ashley in a way I apparently never did. At Thanksgiving, she arrived with catered desserts from a bakery downtown. Everyone swooned over her cheesecake like it was heaven itself, while my pumpkin pie, made from scratch, sat mostly untouched. At Ashley's birthday, Linda gifted her a diamond bracelet, while I brought a photo album I'd spent weeks curating. Guess which gift made it into Instagram photos? And now, at Christmas, Linda got the BMW with the red bow. I got $3 and a lecture about symbolism. It's funny, in a bitter kind of way. They call her Mom Linda, as if the title of mother is something that can be handed out like a party favor. As if being Marcus's real mother, the one who carried him for 9 months, nursed him through chickenpox, cheered through Little League games, and cried at his wedding, counts for less than 8 months of smiles and sparkling jewelry. I shouldn't care, I tell myself. He's an adult. He can make his own choices. But standing there, holding that ridiculous piggy bank, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years: pure resentment. Because no matter how much I sacrificed, no matter how much of myself I poured into building his life, I had been demoted, replaced, left with scraps while another woman wore the crown I had earned. The house was quiet except for the ticking of Tom's old grandfather clock. I glanced at the empty dining table, still cluttered with plates from the meal I had spent 6 hours preparing. Honey glazed ham, fresh rolls, casseroles, all of it made by my hands. And yet, as soon as the last dish was cleared, they ran outside to admire Linda's car. Not once did Marcus offer to help me wash the dishes. Not once did Ashley ask if I wanted to come along for the ride. Not once did Linda look back to thank me for the food she'd devoured. They all piled into the BMW, laughing and clapping, while I stood in the shadows of the window with a pink piggy bank and the bitter taste of betrayal on my tongue. That night, I lay awake replaying it all in my head. The sacrifices, the years, the memories. How could all of that add up to $3? How could my worth be measured against leather seats and a shiny red bow? I didn't know it then, but the resentment burning in my chest was about to lead me down a path Linda never imagined. A path where being overlooked would become my greatest weapon. By the time the front door slammed shut and their laughter trailed into the night, my kitchen felt colder than the winter wind outside. The hum of the dishwasher was the only sound left. A lonely, mechanical rhythm against the backdrop of silence. My house, once a place filled with the noise of children running through hallways, Tom's deep laugh echoing from the living room, Marcus begging for just 5 more minutes before bedtime, now felt like a hollow stage after the actors had left. 6 hours I had spent on that meal. 6 hours on my feet, peeling, chopping, kneading. Honey glazed ham, green bean casserole from scratch, mashed potatoes whipped to perfection, fresh rolls rising in the oven, and even that ridiculous English trifle Ashley insisted on. My hands were raw from washing dishes, my back ached, my legs throbbed. And for what? For Marcus to clap Linda on the back and call her Mom Linda like she'd earned that title. For Ashley to squeal with delight as they drove off to parade the BMW around the neighborhood. For Linda to beam with the kind of joy I hadn't seen on my son's face in years, and it wasn't directed at me. Not one of them asked if I wanted to come. Not one of them paused to say, "Thank you for dinner." No, they announced their departure as if I were the hired help, left standing in a kitchen that smelled of ham and garlic bread, with dirty plates stacked high and not a soul to share the leftovers with. I sank into a chair, staring at the table. Candles still flickered in their holders, wax running down in uneven drips. Wrinkled napkins sat crumpled beside half-eaten plates. Wine glasses smudged with lipstick lined the edge like forgotten soldiers. I thought about the Christmases when Marcus was little, how he'd tear through wrapping paper with the excitement of a boy who still believed in magic. How Tom would gather us close to read from the old Bible before dinner, his voice steady and warm. Back then, even when money was tight, love was plentiful. Now love came in the form of a $60,000 BMW for a woman who hadn't even been around long enough to know Tom's middle name. I pushed myself up and began clearing plates. Old habits die hard. Mothers clean up. Mothers put things back together, even when no one thanks them. I was rinsing the last platter when something caught my eye on the counter near the window. A sleek, black leather purse. Not mine. Linda's. It was perched neatly beside the cookie tin, as if it belonged in my home, as if it had every right to rest beside my things. A Kate Spade bag, I guessed, judging by the silver clasp. The kind of purse that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill. I dried my hands and stared at it, expensive, heavy-looking. Careless of her to leave it behind. For a moment, I considered rushing outside, waving it in the air, and calling them back. That's what the good mom in me wanted to do, the mom who always kept things running smoothly, who always made sure no one left anything behind. But then I remembered the piggy bank. $3. My gift for decades of sacrifice. And suddenly, I wasn't in a rush to hand it back. I stood there in the dim light of my kitchen, listening to the faint ticking of the grandfather clock, staring at that purse like it was more than leather and stitching. It was a question, maybe even an opportunity. I didn't touch it yet. Not that night. But I knew one thing for certain. Linda Chen had made a mistake leaving it behind. A mistake that, soon enough, I was going to make sure she regretted. The purse sat there like a dare. Black leather, smooth and polished, catching the faint reflection of the Christmas lights from the tree in the corner. I told myself I was only checking for identification. That's what any good hostess would do, right? Make sure nothing had slipped out, maybe set it aside in case Linda came back for it that night. That was the excuse, anyway. But when I lifted the bag, it surprised me. Heavier than it looked. Weighted, like a secret. I carried it to the kitchen table, the one still littered with crumbs and abandoned wine glasses, and eased it open. Inside, the smell of leather mixed with something faintly floral, Linda's expensive perfume. On top sat her phone, glittering in a rhinestone case. Beneath that, a wallet, thick and overstuffed. Curiosity got the better of me. I opened it. And that's when I realized. This wasn't the kind of wallet most widows carry. This was a treasure chest. Crisp bills, folded neatly, nearly $400 in cash. Credit cards from every major bank, Chase, American Express, Citibank, lined up like soldiers. Store cards for Nordstrom, Saks, Tiffany. It was a collection that screamed wealth and privilege. But it was what I found tucked behind her license that made me freeze. Bank statements. 3 of them, printed fresh, dated just last week. I unfolded the first one, my eyes widening as the numbers swam into focus. I wasn't looking at balances in the hundreds or even the thousands. These were figures with zeros stretching longer than the lines of my grocery receipt. Tens of thousands. Hundreds of thousands. One account alone held more money than Tom and I had ever seen in our lives, even after his life insurance. I sat back stunned. All this time, Linda had been playing the part of the lonely widow. Polite, modest, grateful for a seat at our table. And yet, she was loaded. Not comfortable, not doing okay wealthy, loaded. The kind of wealthy that makes a $60,000 BMW look like pocket change. And suddenly, the gift didn't make sense anymore. Why would Marcus feel the need to buy her a car? Why would Ashley gush about how much Linda deserved it? Why would they scrape and save, if they even could, to shower her with something she clearly didn't need? It gnawed at me. The puzzle pieces didn't fit. I glanced back at the purse, half expecting it to speak. To tell me why a woman with a bank account fat enough to fund a small country was cozying up to my son and daughter-in-law. To explain why she slid so easily into a role that wasn't hers to take. Instead, the purse sat silently, smug, as if mocking me for not having realized sooner. I slipped everything back carefully, exactly as I'd found it. I wasn't ready to reveal what I'd seen, not to Marcus, not to Ashley. Not to anyone, not yet. But as I zipped the bag closed and set it back on the counter, one thing was crystal clear. Linda Chen wasn't just here for companionship. She wasn't just filling a void or looking for family. No. Linda was hiding something, and I was going to find out what. The next afternoon, I was stacking leftovers into the fridge when the phone rang. Not my cell, the house phone. The one that only telemarketers and old friends ever used anymore. Mrs. Williams? A man's voice asked, professional, clipped. Yes, this is she. This is Officer Patterson with the state police. I'm calling about a report we received regarding a missing person. My heart skipped. A missing person? Yes, ma'am, Linda Chen. Our records show she was last seen at your address yesterday afternoon. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard. Linda Chen, missing. My eyes darted to the counter where her purse had sat only hours before. I had returned it to her last night, watched her smile that sugary smile as she tucked it under her arm. I'm sorry, officer, I said slowly, choosing every word with care. I don't believe I'm familiar with that name. A pause. Papers shuffled in the background. Our report indicates she attended a family Christmas dinner at your residence yesterday. She left in a BMW with your son Marcus Williams and his wife Ashley. My grip on the phone tightened. So they knew about the car. They knew she had been here. But Linda Chen? That wasn't the name she'd given us. To us, she was Linda. Sweet, helpless, lonely Linda. I see, I replied carefully. Yes, we had dinner. She left with Marcus and Ashley later in the evening. So she didn't return home with you? No, officer. They went for a drive to show her the new car. Perhaps you should contact them directly. When I hung up, my pulse was racing. Missing person, a son filing reports. And a name I'd never once heard her mention, Chen. I walked back to the kitchen window, staring out at the patch of driveway where the BMW had sat the night before. Pieces of the puzzle clattered in my mind. All this time, Linda had told us she was alone. A widow. No children. No family to lean on. She'd spun that story at every dinner table, letting us believe she was grateful just to be included. And yet, somewhere out there, a son was frantic enough to call the police because she hadn't come home. Her purse, the thick wallet, the fat bank statements, the secrecy. It all started to twist together in a way that made my stomach clench. I picked up my own phone from the counter and glanced at the screen. A string of notifications lit up Linda's device the night before while it was in my hands, texts, missed calls. At the time, I had skimmed them, too overwhelmed by the shock of her wealth to pay close attention. But now the memory sharpened. Deposit confirmed. Meeting confirmed for Thursday. And messages from a man named Brian. Mom, where are you? Please call me back. The police are looking for you. Brian Chen, her son, the one she never mentioned. The one she had erased from her story to us. Why? Why lie about being alone? Why weave herself so tightly into our family, pretending we were her only circle? And why did she want Marcus and Ashley, and me, by extension, to believe that she was a poor, grieving widow when she was anything but? I pulled out a chair and sat down hard, staring at the silent phone on the table. The kitchen clock ticked, each second heavier than the last. It wasn't just that Linda had money, or that she had secrets. It was that she had lied, boldly, shamelessly, and consistently. The Linda we thought we knew didn't exist, and whoever the real Linda Chen was, she was playing a much bigger game than any of us realized. And for the first time, I understood, the BMW wasn't a gift. It was bait. I couldn't shake Officer Patterson's words. Linda Chen, reported missing by her son. They echoed in my mind all night as I lay awake, staring at the shadows on my ceiling. By morning, I couldn't stand it any longer. I went back to the one piece of evidence still within my reach, her purse. I had returned it, yes, but not before curiosity had led me to glance at her phone. And that memory gnawed at me like a loose tooth. I pulled my own phone out of my robe pocket and scrolled to the images I had taken last night, quick snaps I thought I might never need. At the time, I'd only focused on the bank statements, but I remembered something else. Notifications, buzz after buzz lighting up her lock screen. So when I got the chance again, when Linda left her phone charging in the living room during dessert the night before, I had done what any suspicious woman would do. I'd looked deeper. At first, it was innocent enough. Selfies, snapshots of parties, dinners. But then I scrolled further back. And that's when I saw them. Photos that should never have existed. The first was of Tom's death certificate. Crisp and clear, my husband's name spelled out in cold black ink. The same document I kept locked in my bedroom drawer. Another swipe, another chill. A photo of our marriage license. Again, stored away in a folder I rarely touched. Then came the property records, pages I hadn't seen before, showing the appraised value of my house. My house, the one Tom and I had bought for $60,000 3 decades ago. The document stamped with a date only weeks earlier, as though someone had ordered a fresh appraisal. My stomach turned when the next photo appeared. My jewelry box. Not the outside, but the inside, angled in such a way that only someone who'd been in my bedroom, alone, could have taken it. Nestled among the trinkets was my social security card, photographed with precision. My hand trembled as I scrolled faster, a sick realization taking hold. These weren't keepsakes. They weren't mementos. They were records, a catalog. Evidence. Linda hadn't just joined our family gatherings to smile and eat ham. She had been documenting, surveilling, collecting. I dropped my phone onto the table and pressed my hands to my face. My chest was tight, my pulse racing. The woman Marcus called Mom Linda wasn't here for love or companionship. She wasn't a lonely widow filling a void. She was a predator. And I had let her walk into my home, sit at my table, handle my documents, touch the pieces of my life that were never hers to touch. Images flashed in my mind. Linda's polished smile, her honeyed voice, her casual questions about Tom's pension, about whether I'd updated my insurance policies, about how I was managing since he passed. They hadn't been idle conversations. They had been reconnaissance. The worst part? I hadn't seen it. Not when she charmed Ashley with designer gifts. Not when she slipped into Marcus's life like a second mother. Not when she sat beside me at Thanksgiving, patting my hand and calling me dear. I thought about Brian Chen, the devoted son frantically calling the police when his mother didn't return home. Did he know what she was doing? Did he understand the game she was playing hundreds of miles away? Or was he just another pawn in her carefully crafted lies? The grandfather clock chimed noon, each note sharp as a knife. I looked around my kitchen, once a sanctuary, now a crime scene in disguise. Linda Chen wasn't family, she was a fraud, and she'd been studying me like prey. But predators make one mistake, sooner or later. They underestimate their target. And Linda Chen had just underestimated me. By the time Marcus and Ashley invited me over for dinner 2 nights later, I had rehearsed the conversation in my head 100 different ways. I wasn't going to accuse Linda outright, not yet. No, I would nudge, test, prod, and see how she wriggled when the truth brushed too close. The table was set with Ashley's usual flair, polished silverware, wine glasses gleaming in candlelight, and a store-bought cheesecake from Linda's favorite bakery displayed like a crown jewel in the center. My homemade casserole sat at the far end of the table, mostly ignored. Linda was already in her seat, hair coiffed perfectly, a silk scarf tied around her neck. She looked every bit the part of the glamorous matriarch, basking in her borrowed spotlight. We ate, we chatted. The conversation drifted from work updates to the neighbor's new puppy. All the while, I waited for my moment. When Ashley poured coffee and passed the sugar bowl, I leaned back and smiled sweetly. So, Linda, how's your son Brian doing these days? The effect was immediate. Her hand froze on the handle of her cup, eyes flickering for just a fraction of a second before she laughed lightly. Oh, Brian. Well, our relationship is complicated. Complicated. That was the word people used when they wanted to hide behind vagueness. Marcus frowned. Brian, I didn't know you had a son. Ashley's eyebrows shot up. Neither did I. Linda waved a delicate hand, as if brushing away an inconvenience. It's not something I like to talk about. He lives in Seattle, far away. We don't see each other much. Different lives, you know how it is. I sipped my coffee, letting the silence stretch. Funny, I said softly, because the state police called me the other day. Apparently, he was worried enough to report you missing. He must care about you a great deal. Linda's smile faltered for half a beat before she recovered. Well, yes. Brian has always been overprotective. He worries too much, that boy. It's part of why we don't speak often. He tends to exaggerate. Ashley leaned forward, her tone soft with sympathy. That must be hard, Linda. To have a son who can't respect boundaries. Marcus nodded, shooting me a look that stung. Yeah, Mom. Not every family relationship is simple. Simple, as if I were the one complicating things. I set down my cup with deliberate calm. I suppose that's true. Still, it seems wonderful to have a child who loves you enough to notice when you don't come home. Not everyone is that lucky. The words hung in the air like frost. For a moment, Marcus looked uncomfortable, but Linda's hand slipped onto his arm, and he softened under her touch. You raised a thoughtful man, she said sweetly. Marcus has been such a blessing to me these past months. Like the son I never had. The son she never had. The son she never had, while hers sat in Seattle, frantic, calling the police. I forced a smile, though my insides twisted. Yes, he is thoughtful. Thoughtful enough to buy her a $60,000 car while handing me $3 in a piggy bank. The rest of dinner passed in a blur. Linda told stories that made everyone laugh. Ashley leaned in, nodding eagerly, drinking in every word. Marcus kept glancing at her like a proud child showing off his new artwork. And me? I sat there, invisible, every bit of suspicion growing sharper. By dessert, I had no appetite. Not for cheesecake, not for conversation, not for their blind adoration of a woman who is weaving lies right in front of their faces. When I excused myself and stepped outside into the cold December air, I realized something that chilled me more than the wind. It wasn't just that Linda was lying. It was that my son and daughter-in-law would rather believe her lies than my truth. And that betrayal cut deeper than anything else. The uneasy laughter from that dinner lingered with me long after I got home. Every word Linda had spoken, every lie she smoothed over with that honeyed voice, buzzed in my ears like static. I knew she was hiding something. I just didn't know how deep it went. The answer came a few days later, in the form of a phone call I hadn't expected. "Mrs. Williams?" the woman's voice asked. "This is Diane from Henderson Appraisal Services. I'm just calling to confirm whether you received the copy of the property assessment we completed on your house in October." My grip on the phone tightened. "I'm sorry, what appraisal?" "The one ordered by Marcus Williams, for estate planning purposes. It should have been sent to your address." My heart began to pound. Estate planning? Marcus had no authority to order an appraisal of my home. "Not without my permission." "I never authorized such a thing," I said carefully. "And I never received any paperwork." "Oh," the woman hesitated. "Well, according to our file, Marcus provided the necessary documentation. He's listed as your power of attorney." The words sliced through me like ice. Power of attorney. I hung up quickly, my hands shaking. Marcus? Power of attorney? I had never signed anything granting him that right. Not after Tom died, not ever. I had been very clear. I would control my affairs until the day I couldn't. And yet, someone had filed paperwork saying otherwise. I drove straight to my lawyer's office, my pulse hammering in my throat. Margaret Patterson had handled our wills and estate matters for years. If anything official had been filed, she would know. She greeted me with a warm smile, but it faltered as soon as she saw my face. "Dorothy, what's wrong?" I explained everything, the appraisal, the supposed power of attorney, the phone call. Margaret listened intently, her brow furrowed. "That doesn't make sense," she said finally. "I never prepared power of attorney documents for you. You insisted you wanted to keep full control after Tom passed." "Exactly. So how did Marcus get authorization?" Margaret turned to her computer, fingers flying over the keyboard. After a moment, her face went pale. She swiveled the screen toward me. On it was a scanned document, stamped and notarized, dated 3 weeks ago. A power of attorney naming Marcus Williams as my legal representative with full authority over my financial and property matters. And at the bottom, my name, my signature. Except it wasn't. The Y in Dorothy was wrong. The dot above the I in Williams was a circle, not the neat dash I always made. It was close, close enough to fool someone who didn't know me, but I knew. And Margaret knew. "This is a forgery," I whispered, my stomach lurching. Margaret's expression was grim. "A very good one, but not yours. Whoever filed this committed fraud." I sat back, my whole body cold. Linda's face flashed in my mind, her probing questions, her bank statements, her careful charm. Of course, this was the plan. Not just to cozy into our family, not just to charm Marcus and Ashley. She wanted everything. My house, my pension, Tom's life insurance. Every cent we had worked for. The BMW wasn't a gift. It was a distraction. I clenched my fists, fury burning through the shock. They thought I wouldn't notice. They thought I'd smile politely, sign whatever papers they put in front of me, and hand over my life. Not this time. I looked at Margaret, my voice steady. "Don't alert anyone yet. If we tip our hand now, they'll cover their tracks. I need to know exactly what they're planning." "Dorothy, this is dangerous," she warned. "They could sell your house out from under you. Drain your accounts. You need the police involved immediately." "Not yet," I repeated firmly. "If we move too soon, it'll be my word against theirs. I need proof, solid proof." I stood, straighter than I had in years. "Linda Chen thinks she's playing chess with a frail old widow. But I've been watching, I've been learning, and I'm not going to be her victim." That night, as I sat at my kitchen table staring at the glowing Christmas lights reflected in the window, I felt something shift inside me. For 35 years, I had been Marcus's mother. A woman who smiled through pain, who carried burdens in silence, who accepted scraps with gratitude. But now I was something else. I was the hunter. And Linda Chen had no idea what was coming. The call came the next morning, Linda's voice sugar sweet on the other end of the line. "Dorothy, darling, I was hoping we could have a little chat. Just us women. No distractions, no misunderstandings. How about that lovely cafe downtown? Say 2 o'clock? Neutral ground. That was what predators chose when they didn't want to be cornered." I agreed without hesitation, my voice as soft as hers. "Of course, Linda. That sounds perfect." The cafe was nearly empty when I arrived. Mid-afternoon light slanted through tall windows, casting long shadows across the floor. Linda was already there, seated in the corner with her back to the wall, a position chosen carefully, so she could see everyone coming and going. She stood to hug me, her perfume cloying, her smile rehearsed. "Dorothy, you look lovely. I'm so glad we could do this." I forced a smile, sitting across from her. "It's nice to have girl time." We ordered coffee. She made small talk about the weather, about how thoughtful Marcus was, about how exciting it was to have family to share the holidays with. But soon her tone shifted, her smile thinning into concern. "Dorothy," she said, leaning forward, "I want you to know Marcus and Ashley are very worried about you. They think you might be feeling left out, maybe even jealous of our relationship." I widened my eyes, feigning surprise. "Jealous? Oh my goodness, why would they think that?" "Well," she continued smoothly, "you asked some questions the other night about my son, about my finances. It felt a little intrusive, like maybe you don't quite trust me yet." I tilted my head, innocent. I was just making conversation. I didn't mean anything by it. Her hand slipped across the table to pat mine. "Of course, sweetie. I know you meant well, but here's the thing, Marcus shared some concerns with me. He's worried you aren't being strategic about your assets, about your future." There it was. The pivot. "My assets?" I asked, knitting my brows in confusion. "Yes, you have a beautiful home, but houses are money locked away. Equity just sitting there, gathering dust, when it could be working for you. You could sell to an investment group I know, then lease it back at a very reasonable rate. You'd have hundreds of thousands of dollars to invest, plus the comfort of staying right where you are." She spoke quickly, smoothly, like a salesperson delivering a memorized pitch. I blinked slowly, pretending to struggle with the concept. "Sell my house? But then I wouldn't own it." "That's where the strategy comes in," Linda assured me, her eyes sparkling. "You'd unlock all that value and put it into tax-advantaged investments. You'd have more cash flow, less worry. Marcus could even help manage the portfolio. It's a win-win." I let silence stretch, studying her carefully. She leaned in, eager, too eager. The mask of benevolent Mom Linda was slipping, replaced by the calculating woman who had photographed my private documents and filed forged papers behind my back. "That sounds complicated," I murmured. "It is complicated, which is why you need experts, people who care about you, people you can trust." Her grip on my hand tightened. "Dorothy, I think of you like the mother I never had. I wanted to help you make the smartest decisions possible. The mother she never had." The words soured in my mouth. She had a son who called the police when she disappeared, a son who sent frantic texts begging her to call back. And yet here she was, looking me in the eye and telling me I was her stand-in family, all while planning to strip me of everything I owned. I sipped my coffee, hiding the steel in my voice. "It's certainly a lot to think about." "Of course, dear," Linda said, settling back with a triumphant smile. "But don't think too long. Opportunities like this don't come often. We'd need to act within a few weeks." Urgency, pressure, classic con artist tactics. As we hugged goodbye in the parking lot, she whispered, "I'm so glad we had this talk, Dorothy. I feel like we understand each other better now." I hugged her back, smiling sweetly into her shoulder. "Oh, Linda, I understand you perfectly." Driving home, my hands gripped the wheel tighter than ever. Now I knew exactly how far she was willing to go. 3 days after my coffee with Linda, Marcus showed up at my door unannounced. He carried a leather folder tucked under his arm and wore that serious face he used to put on before asking for something big. "Mom," he said, his tone rehearsed, "can we talk?" I let him in, already bracing myself. He sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Tom and I had taught him to spell his name, to add fractions, to pray before meals. Now, he spread glossy papers across it like he was pitching a business deal. "These are the investment documents Linda mentioned," he began, tapping the stack. "Reverse mortgage applications, portfolio outlines, projections. It's all legal, it's all safe." I flipped through the pages slowly. Numbers and jargon leapt out, words designed to confuse, to overwhelm, to bully someone into signing. My lips curved into a thin smile. My, I said. "You've been busy." He shifted in his chair. "Linda's friends are very thorough. They want everything to be airtight. This is an opportunity for you, Mom, for all of us." I set the papers aside and fixed him with a steady gaze. "Marcus, before we go any further, I want you to tell me the truth. Are you in financial trouble?" His face tightened. "What makes you ask that?" I leaned forward. "Well, let's review. You buy a $60,000 car for a woman you've known less than a year. You take out a second mortgage. You claim to have gotten a promotion, yet your old boss tells me otherwise. And now you're sitting here with paperwork that would strip me of everything your father and I built. Call it mother's intuition." For a moment, the mask slipped. His shoulders sagged, and he stared at his hands like a scolded boy. Then his phone buzzed. Linda's name flashed across the screen. He silenced it quickly, but the spell of honesty had already cracked open. "Mom," he whispered, "we're drowning." The words fell heavy between us. "Ashley lost her job 6 months ago. We've been behind on the mortgage, on the kids' tuition, on everything. The bills kept piling up, and I couldn't fix it." His voice broke. "Linda said she knew people who could help. But she told us we had to show we were serious first." "And the car?" I asked, already knowing the answer. He nodded, shame coloring his cheeks. "She said if we made a grand gesture, it would prove our commitment. She promised once we showed her how much we valued her advice, her connections would turn everything around." I sat back, fury and heartbreak twisting inside me. My son, my only child, had been manipulated into indebting himself to impress a woman who already had more money than she could spend in a lifetime. "So you mortgaged your house and bought her a BMW as a down payment on a scam." He winced. "I thought it was smart at the time. She showed us charts, testimonials, examples of families she'd helped. She made it sound like salvation, Mom, and I was desperate." I studied him closely, searching for the boy who once brought me dandelions and called them flowers. I saw traces of him now, beneath the exhaustion, the shame, the fear. "She's been bleeding you dry," I said softly. His eyes filled with tears. "I know, but by the time I realized it, we were in too deep. The mortgage is due. The BMW payments are crushing us. Ashley's talking about leaving. I didn't know what else to do but come to you." I wanted to rage at him, to demand how he could have been so blind. But the truth was written across his face. He wasn't just complicit, he was a victim too. Linda hadn't just targeted me. She had ensnared Marcus and Ashley, wrapping them in promises until they couldn't see the bars of the cage closing around them. I reached across the table and covered his trembling hands with mine. "Listen to me, Marcus. You've been played. We all have. But Linda made one mistake. She thought I was weak. She forgot that I've been surviving storms long before she ever set foot in this family." He blinked at me, hope flickering in his eyes. "What do we do now?" I squeezed his hand, steady and certain. "Now, sweetheart, we stop playing by her rules. And we start playing by mine." For the first time in weeks, I saw my son's eyes clear of Linda's spell. The shame still lingered, but under it flickered something stronger, fear, and maybe even a glimmer of resolve. "Mom," Marcus whispered, "what do we do?" I didn't hesitate. I had spent sleepless nights piecing it together. We turned the tables. I pushed back from the table, crossed to my desk, and pulled out a folder I had been quietly preparing. Inside were papers I had printed, highlighted, even aged with coffee stains to make them look convincingly handled. I spread them across the kitchen table like a general laying out a battle plan. Marcus's jaw dropped. What is this? Proof, I said. At least, the kind Linda won't be able to resist. Fake bank statements, fabricated investment summaries, a mock appraisal showing my house worth nearly $2 million instead of $400,000. She thinks she's hunting a woman with modest assets. Let's show her a whale. Ashley, who had arrived halfway through Marcus's confession, leaned over the papers with wide eyes. Dorothy. These look real. They have to, I replied. Linda thrives on greed. If she believes I have more than she imagined, her caution will vanish. She'll rush to close the deal, and that's when we'll catch her. Marcus frowned. But Mom, what if she realizes they're fake? What if she finds out and… She won't, I cut him off. She's already emotionally invested. She's been grooming you both for months. People close to their prize ignore red flags. That's how cons collapse, on their own arrogance. I laid out the plan in crisp detail. Step 1. Marcus would call Linda, voice filled with contrition. He'd tell her I had changed my mind, that I now trusted her judgment and was ready to invest. He would apologize for my confusion and insist I wanted her guidance. Step 2. Ashley would arrange a meeting with Linda and her so-called investment group. She would insist I was old-fashioned and wanted to meet everyone face-to-face before signing anything. That demand would corner Linda, force her to scramble for proof of people who didn't exist. Step 3. At that meeting, I would present my financials, the inflated bank statements, the fake appraisals. I would play the part of a gullible widow dazzled by promises, all while recording every word. Step 4. Once Linda committed herself, once she proposed offshore accounts or pressured me to sign papers, we'd have enough evidence to bring down her entire operation. The room was silent when I finished. Only the clock ticked, steady as a drumbeat. Marcus ran a hand through his hair. Mom, this is risky. If she suspects anything… She already suspects I'm weak, I said firmly. That's her blind spot. And that's what we'll use. Ashley swallowed hard. What if we mess up? What if we say the wrong thing? Then we lose everything, I answered honestly. Your house, your savings, my home, Tom's pension, it all disappears into Linda's pocket. But if we pull this off, we don't just stop her, we expose her. Marcus stared at me stunned. You're really going to do this? I met his eyes. I've survived 35 years of sacrifices, widowhood, and being replaced at my own table. Linda thinks she's the only one who can play games. She's wrong. I know how to fight quietly, patiently, and when the time is right, I strike. Slowly, Marcus nodded. Ashley's eyes hardened. For the first time, I saw them both not as pawns, but as allies. All right, Marcus said, his voice steadier. Tell us exactly what to say. We spent hours rehearsing, role-playing every possible question Linda might ask. Ashley practiced her apologetic tone, Marcus's earnest charm. I coached them like an actress preparing her cast. By midnight, the fear had dulled into focus. When they left, I stood alone in the kitchen, staring at the spread of false documents. My heart pounded, but my lips curled into a smile. Linda thought she had written the script for this family. But tomorrow, she would discover that I had picked up the pen. The trap was set. And if we played our parts, Linda Chen was walking straight into it. Friday afternoon, the three of us stood on Linda's porch. Marcus's tie was crooked, Ashley's hands trembled, and my purse felt heavy with the weight of my phone, its recorder already running. Linda opened the door dressed for victory, silk blouse, gold earrings, lipstick a shade too bold for comfort. Her smile stretched wide. Dorothy, Marcus, Ashley, come in, come in. I'm so excited you've decided to move forward. Her living room looked less like a home and more like a boardroom. Papers, charts, glossy brochures, all spread across the coffee table. Fresh flowers filled the air with an artificial sweetness that nearly masked the stink of desperation. We took our seats. Marcus played his part, looking sheepish. Mom's been thinking, Linda. She realizes you've been right all along. She's ready to invest. Linda's eyes lit up. Oh, Marcus, that's wonderful. You'll see, Dorothy, this is going to change your life. I reached into my bag and laid my own stack of papers on the table, fake bank statements, doctored appraisals, carefully crafted documents. Before we go too far, I said, smiling sweetly, I had my accountant do a full review. Turns out Tom was more financially savvy than I realized. My liquid assets are closer to 2 million. Linda's pupils dilated. Her fingers twitched toward the papers, unable to resist. She scanned the numbers greedily, her breathing quickening. 2 million, she whispered. Dorothy, this opens up far more opportunities. With this much, we could pursue aggressive growth strategies, international diversification, even offshore accounts to minimize taxes. Ashley gasped softly, perfectly on cue. Offshore? Linda nodded briskly. Completely legal, when structured properly. My associates specialize in these vehicles. We could have your funds moved within weeks. I leaned back, folding my hands in my lap. Moved offshore, you say? That does sound complicated. Not for us, Linda assured me quickly. You wouldn't need to worry about a thing. All I'd need is your signature, and we'd handle the rest. I let silence hang. Her eagerness was palpable, her mask slipping with every word. She wasn't the gentle widow now. She was the predator, baring her teeth in her haste to devour. Finally, I tilted my head. Linda, how exactly did you get into this line of work? You've never told me. Her eyes flickered. Oh, I've worked with several investment groups over the years. I have a talent for identifying the right clients. And your son, Brian? I pressed. Does he work in finance as well? The question hit like a blow. Her lips parted, but no sound came out at first. Then she laughed nervously. Brian? No, he's not involved in this world. I smiled, slow and deliberate. That's interesting. Because when I mentioned your name to an attorney, she said Brian Chen has quite the reputation for prosecuting elder fraud. The room froze. Linda's smile cracked, the mask disintegrating before our eyes. She rose suddenly, knocking her chair back. I think this meeting is over. I stood too, calm as a stone. Yes, it is. Because I've been recording every word you've said today. Your promises of offshore accounts. Your proposals to liquidate my assets. Your eagerness to secure signatures under false pretenses. Her face drained of color. You can't prove anything. Oh, but I can. I pulled another folder from my purse and tossed it onto the table. Inside were copies of the forged power of attorney documents, the unauthorized appraisal, and photographs of the surveillance images from her phone. The county clerk has your fraud on file. The police have already been notified, and every word you just said is preserved. Ashley's voice, steadier than I'd ever heard it, cut through the tension. You manipulated us. You tricked Marcus into debt. You nearly destroyed our family. And for what? Money you didn't even need. Linda's eyes darted wildly, searching for a way out. We can work something out, Dorothy. I can make sure you're taken care of. No, I said firmly. What you're going to do is answer for every lie, every forgery, every theft. Marcus stepped forward, jaw tight. Mom's right. I'll call the police. Panic flashed across Linda's face, but it was too late. Marcus dialed, his voice steady as he gave the address and explained the situation. Linda sank into her chair, deflated, her silk blouse shimmering under the dim light like the skin of a cornered snake. Minute later, the wail of sirens filled the air. When officers entered the house, I handed them the folder. Linda tried to speak, but the weight of evidence silenced her. Her wrists were cuffed, her protests drowned out by the Miranda warning. As they led her out, she twisted her neck to glare at me, venom in her eyes. You think you've won? I met her stare, unflinching. No, Linda, I know I have. The door slammed shut behind her, and the house fell into silence. For the first time in months, I felt the weight lift from my chest. The predator was caged. And this time, it was her turn to lose everything. 6 months later, summer light spilled across my front porch as I sat with a glass of lemonade, the newspaper folded neatly beside me. The headline on the local page still made me smile. Virginia woman sentenced to 3 years for elder fraud scheme. Linda Chen had traded her silk blouses for a prison jumpsuit. Her son, Brian, had testified at the sentencing, his voice breaking as he described the devastation his mother's crimes had caused to other families. I felt for him. It's a special kind of heartbreak when the person who raised you turns out to be a stranger. For me, though, life was beginning to stitch itself back together. Slowly, carefully. Every Sunday, Marcus and Ashley brought the kids. At first, the visits were stiff, weighed down by guilt and awkward silences. But over time, something softened. Emma brought me her drawings, Jake asked me to help with his school project, and Marcus started looking me in the eye again. One Sunday, he handed me a small wrapped box. His hand shook. "Mom, it's not much, but I wanted you to have this." Inside was a framed photo of Tom and me on our wedding day, restored from an old negative he'd found in the garage. We looked impossibly young, full of hope. I traced my fingers over Tom's smile, feeling tears prick my eyes. "There's more," Marcus said, slipping me an envelope. Inside was a letter, written in his uneven scrawl. "Dear Mom, I forgot who I was when I forgot you. I promise I'll never let anyone take your place again." For years, I had carried the weight of disappointment, of being overlooked, of being handed scraps while another woman was crowned Mom. Now, sitting on that porch, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: peace. Inside the house, on the mantel, sat the little pink piggy bank. I had dusted it carefully, polished the cheap plastic until it shone. It no longer mocked me. It reminded me. It reminded me of how easily love can be twisted into leverage. Of how betrayal can come dressed in silk and diamonds. Of how strength sometimes begins with a single insult, $3 rattling like dead leaves inside a toy. But it also reminded me of the fight I'd found inside myself, a fight stronger than Linda's lies, stronger than Marcus's mistakes, stronger than the weight of grief that had nearly broken me. People had tried to measure my worth. A son who thought a piggy bank was symbolic. A woman who believed she could forge my name and steal my life. They were wrong. I smiled as Emma burst onto the porch, clutching a dandelion bouquet. Jake followed, awkward but trying, while Marcus and Ashley trailed behind, laughter chasing them into the sunlit yard. I lifted the lemonade to my lips, the piggy bank gleaming faintly through the window behind me, and thought of the lesson Linda had taught me without meaning to. They thought I was worth $3. Turns out, I was priceless.